Welcome to Buildings and Beyond,
the podcast that explores how we can create a more sustainable built environment
by focusing on efficiency, accessibility, and health.
In this episode, I spoke with Elliot Seibert and Asa Foss from the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. They both work on the ENERGY STAR Homes program, and Elliot actually is a former colleague here at Stephen Winter Associates. They're both very involved in the new ENERGY STAR NextGen Homes program. And as you'll hear, I mistakenly referred to this as an all-electric program. They corrected me. It's electric forward, but not necessarily all electric. The focus really is on reducing CO2 emissions from new homes, operational CO2 emissions. We'll talk about some of the key features, but briefly, in a nutshell, the requirements for the new program are some added envelope efficiency measures, ENERGY STAR heat pumps for heating and cooling, ENERGY STAR heat pump water heaters for water heating, Induction cooktops, and electric vehicle charging infrastructure. This episode was pretty cool for me. We're involved in a lot of programs in our work. It was great just to hear the background, the rationale, how this program was developed. It's abundantly clear that a great deal of thought and effort went into developing this, which, you don't always see in the checklist that you run through while you're trying to certify a building. It was very cool to hear the thought process on how some of these requirements were developed. Quick disclaimer, Elliot and Asa are expressing their own opinions here, not necessarily any official opinions of EPA or anything like that. I started by asking Elliot for a little background on the ENERGY STAR Homes program itself, not NextGen, but the core ENERGY STAR Homes program.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are familiar with ENERGY STAR. We've got, great brand recognition. But you might think about it as, the little blue sticker that's on your fridge when you go to the big box store. So we've actually had a similar label for new homes that we've had for 25 years. The program started in 1995. We have, since that time, 2.3 million certified homes have been built as ENERGY STAR. And what that has meant is those homes are at least 10% better than code. On average, they're actually more like 20% better than code. So it's a pretty significantly better home from an energy perspective. And in addition to energy efficiency, we are looking at building science, as a whole, kind of a house as a system approach. So the core thing is energy efficiency, but we're also looking at mandatory requirements like, flashing and water management and, duct leakage and, blower door and all these things that kind of tie in together to make sure that we're doing energy efficiency the right way. So that's really been the core of ENERGY STAR. And up until now, we've had really just a single tier. Your home was either ENERGY STAR certified or it wasn't. And that's kind of the ENERGY STAR brand. And that's what's changing today. And that's kind of what we're excited to talk about on the podcast.
One thing I've appreciated about ENERGY STAR, and I the first homes I certified as ENERGY STAR was, I think, probably in 2000. So it's been a while, and it's changed a bit since then. But it always required. It's not just on paper that the home looks better. It's not just a model or a look at the specs. It requires on-site verification of insulation, of the blower door testing, duct blaster testing, and then that's been stepped up over the years. Verifying, that's right, like you said, flashing, air sealing.
Yeah, it's not just a paper exercise. Yeah. It starts with an energy model and you prove it out, and you can flexibly figure out how you're going to get to your target performance. But like you said, I think a lot of the value comes in with mandatory at least 2 inspections to the home during construction by certified raters. This is, the specific thing they're looking for. They're, highly trained to look for the energy efficiency stuff, which is not, theoretically it's part of your code inspection, but the code inspectors are looking at life safety first and foremost, and everything else is kind of nice to have.
Yep.
So it's just an extra level of assurance that this stuff is done correctly in that house. And, a lot of this stuff can't be necessarily inspected or will never be upgraded afterwards.
Yeah.
Right. So when you're talking about the insulation in the walls, you're probably never going to go into that, wall again, or if you will, it'll be 50 years from now. So that's kind of why it's so critical to get it right at the time of construction. That's the right time to be looking at it.
So, and NextGen is moving towards all electric. It seems to me, from what I've seen. Asa, do you want to give some background, I guess, for the rationale or why NextGen came around?
Yeah. So as Elliot mentioned, Energy Star is really focused on, at least 10% energy savings over the state's energy code. And, you add in, some of the core, comfort systems like ventilation for, your local exhaust for kitchen and baths, as well as ventilation for like your whole dwelling unit. But we wanted for NextGen to like expand beyond just energy efficiency to look more specifically at how new construction can achieve greater operational emission savings in order to, specifically, make a bigger stand against climate change. So that's the goal, was to, first and foremost, like find a way where we can get new construction to achieve significant emissions reductions.
And
so, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, going all electric is been a push in the green efficient circles that we all work in, and I guess is there at this point with the grid mix all over the country, is there definitely a big advantage emissions wise to going all electric everywhere in the country at this point?
Yeah, so we've done some initial emissions and energy modeling on the NextGen program. And what we're seeing is nationally, compared to the 2021 residential energy code. So if a home was going to be using, gas, space, and water heating, and again, built to that 2021 code levels, if they instead, do NextGen and switch to an Energy Star heat pump for space heating, Energy Star heat pump for water heating, as well as meeting our Energy Star criteria of 10% efficiency improvements. So if you do those like three big things right there, then you're nationally looking at 49% emissions reductions, which is a big number, again, over a pretty darn stringent code. And if we're looking more specifically at the Northeast, we're looking at savings of, over 40% in the Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware region, 64% in New York State, and 58% in New England. Okay. And the reason that those numbers vary, number one, it's a little bit has to do with the climate zone. So the colder you get, the more the emission savings. That's pretty common for Energy Star in general. Like you get better efficiency and better emissions reductions in heating dominated areas. But the bigger driver beyond that is the grid mix. So the cleaner the electricity grid, the more the savings. But the cool thing that we found is that even in states with the dirtiest grids, there are significant emissions reductions, even today. So we hear, from some of our stakeholders, like, hey, like we're waiting for the grid to get cleaner before, we switch out to heat pumps. But according to our initial analysis, like there's not a place in the country where it doesn't make sense from an emissions reduction standpoint to switch to efficient heat pumps for space and water heating.
Right on.
Cool.
And,
I'll just clarify, Rob, that couple things. The first thing is that this Energy Star NextGen is going to be this new level of recognition on top of the base program. So homes can still meet the base program. Nothing's changing with that. So if you know and love Energy Star new homes, nothing's changing. But if you're ready to kind of take this next step, then that's what Energy Star NextGen is going to be. So it'll be an additional kind of label sticker on that home.
Gotcha.
And then the other thing that I'll say is it's not specific. It's electric forward, but I would say it's not all electric necessarily. So what we're more looking at is not saying, we can't have gas in these homes. What we're saying is what technologies do have to be in here. And, we can get into the specifics, right? But it's basically, we know it's going to be energy efficiency, number one. We know it's going to be efficient heat pumps. And then it's going to be EV, charging capability, and then induction cooking for the consumer amenity largely. So you put all these together and you say, this is the stuff that has to be in there. We're not saying you can't have a gas, a vented gas fireplace if you want that, or you can't have, a gas grill out back, for your cookouts, but we are saying we know that these parts are the key. And that's really what we want to get folks directed towards working on, integrating those.
Cool. And Asa, I'm impressed you had emission numbers at your fingertips. But I kind of interrupted you. Was there anything else you were going to say on the background or the kind of rationale for the program?
No, I think Elliot hit on the rationale and background reasonably well. The key for us is focusing on what needs to be included in a home, not what should be excluded. So we've actually had a lot of success talking with a really wide swath of stakeholders and gotten their support behind the ENERGY STAR NextGen program, specifically because we're not, banning gas.
Gotcha.
And I would say one area that they're really intrigued by is that we're allowing gas backup for the space heating. So for the building community that isn't ready yet to do all electric, in particular on the space heating side, we do have this option for them to, keep gas as their backup space heater on those coldest days.
Yep.
So we're hoping that this pragmatic approach is able to, inch the industry forward. And that's really been, one of the strengths, I would say, of the ENERGY STAR program. I'm relatively new to the team. I've only been there for 2 years, but just everything about the program is what is doable today. It's always been an eye towards, achievable steps that the mass market should be able to do.
Gotcha. Cool. Yeah, we'll come back to heating, that's a very interesting point. And I like, Elliot, the electric forward phrasing versus all electric. I definitely appreciate that. So the kind of the core requirements for achieving NextGen, I think there are 5. The first one is just overall efficiency, I think, envelope, load reduction. Elliot, what do you have to do beyond basic ENERGY STAR on that front?
Yeah. The main requirement, I kind of think of it as a prereq, which is that you meet ENERGY STAR, normal ENERGY STAR, quote unquote, version 3.2, which is our highest tier. So we have these different tiers that are responsive to the different generations of energy code. So the 2021 IECC is what spurred version 3.2. And so it's intended to be 10% better than 2021 IECC. I mean, the 2021 IECC already is a pretty okay envelope, right? We're not actually seeing it. We're maybe just seeing it start to roll out into some states, now or soon. And then we're beating that by 10%. The other thing that's unique about version 3.2 for us is we've increased our thermal backstop. So what that means is we're saying no matter what you do to kind of trade off your energy performance, your envelope at least needs to be at the 2021 IECC code level. And this will apply.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, we're saying start with the envelope. That's the most important thing. And that's going to apply even if you're not in a 2021 IECC state.
So you can't trade off with lower envelope specs with more efficient equipment or stuff like that.
You can't just say we're going to do the equipment because, we're going to get to it, but we're asking for the equipment anyways when we get to NextGen, right? But yeah, it's a way to kind of protect and say, the envelope. Again, it goes back to that the envelope's going to be there for 50, 100 years in that house.
Yep.
So that's the number one thing for us. The other thing I would say about it is just kind of why that's so important, which is that we're trying to build a Yeti cooler kind of, right? We need to build this home with extremely low loads in order for the other technologies to work. So if you don't do that as a starting point, you're not going to get the performance out of these very advanced, very smart, very high-tech systems that, we'll get to next. They want to kind of just sip energy, right? They're not a blast furnace that just wants to be, turned on at full blast. They're not going to perform as well in that situation. And the other thing it allows you to do, if you do have those, that Yeti cooler kind of effect, is all of a sudden now the house has the ability at least to be more responsive. If you're hooked up with your utility and you're getting those signals from the utility of, hey, we're peaking. It's a really cold day. We're hitting an electric peak on the grid. We'd like you to, maybe help us out here. The home can say, okay, that's fine. I'll turn off my heating for a half an hour, 45 minutes. Like, not a big deal, and you might not even notice it. It just kind of happens in the background. So it's really kind of an enabler, and that's why I say it's the prereq. So
yeah, it's a good point. I mean, once you get the loads low, you have so much leeway in how you meet those loads comfortably, efficiently.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. And it just and beyond performance, it's comfort, and that's really at the end of the day what the homeowner is going to care about most.
And one of the nice things are, if you're going to be doing Energy Star version 3.2, which again, as Elliot mentioned, is the prereq for NextGen, starting January 1st, 2025, any home or apartment that's sold or leased that wants to take advantage of the $2,500 45L tax credit, they're going to have to do version 3.2. So that's not that long away. So there's going to be a pretty big carrot to get you from where you're at to the Energy Star version 3.2. So again, even though that is not an insignificant efficiency improvement, our expectation is that with this additional funding from 45L, that a good majority of the above code market is going to be there in the next few years.
Gotcha. Yeah, we should make sure to put some links to that in the show notes. That is important info. So moving on to the heating and cooling system, you mentioned heat pumps. I think that there are explicitly Energy Star heat pumps required. Is that right?
Yep. So we've got a couple of requirements around heat pumps. So number one, it has to be Energy Star certified. Number two, it has to be multi-speed. So either 2 or variable.
Is this for air source or ground source?
That is for air source. So ground source, we're not going to have that requirement.
Okay.
For ground source, if you're doing that, then you're going to be good. They tend to be, multi-speed anyways. The next requirement for heat pumps is that they need to be connected capable, so they're able to participate in demand response events if the occupant so chooses. But they need to have that capability either by being EPA certified as connected or by having an Energy Star smart thermostat, which enables that demand responsiveness to occur. And then the final is for projects that are in climate zones 5 through 8, or cold climates. They have to meet the Energy Star cold climate certification. It's that's a new designation from Energy Star. It was just recently rolled out. And starting early 2023, on our Energy Star product finder, you should be able to search for cold climate certified heat pumps and start seeing a pretty decent list of compliant products.
Is that also just for the air source? There's not a separate...
There's not a ground source requirement for that.
Yeah.
But that is for ducted and ductless air source heat pumps. Yep.
So this is interesting. So you're actually... when I first started doing Energy Star, it baffled quite a few clients, builders, that you could have an Energy Star home that doesn't require, Energy Star windows and Energy Star refrigerator and Energy Star heating and cooling system. That it was, you could do trade-offs to get where you needed to be overall. But this is an explicit requirement for only in cold climates that you need an Energy Star cold climate certified air source heat pump. Yeah,
what you'll see with our set of requirements that we have for NextGen is that, it's the Energy Star efficiency baseline plus Energy Star products on there.
Okay. Gotcha.
Instead of having that, performance target of % improvement over code, we're not saying you have to be 40% emissions reduced over the code home. We're saying you have to do these 4 specific technologies and then design and install them properly, because as I'm sure, you've talked about before in your podcast, the design and installation of the heat pumps for space heating and heat pumps for water heating is so important.
Oh my God.
So we design our requirements around some of those best practices.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I don't even want to go there because we'll spend a
Sorry, I brought it up.
talking about that.
But it's a really good point, Rob. And actually, I mean, I'll just say it's not just cold climate heat pumps, right? It's actually all heat pumps need to be ENERGY STAR certified. And And the same thing when we get to the water heaters, it's going to be all water heaters need to be ENERGY STAR certified. And part of that is because it is a cutting edge program. We want to make sure that the consumer is going to have a good experience with it. And I think that's really where the benefit of that ENERGY STAR product spec shines, because kind of like our homes program, it's not just about the efficiency of it. That's the core, but then it's all this other performance and amenity stuff that goes around it for that it's going to work well.
Okay.
And, we can talk more about that with maybe like the heat pump water heater, but we felt like in this, there are downsides to tying it to the product certification, which is that sometimes you have some product availability questions and, items listed and it goes off the list and those kind of things. So we have kind of process ways to work around some of that stuff and help our, partners, be able to plan for it. But in this case, I think the benefits outweigh the downsides of tying it specifically to the product specs. And that's, again, just going to make sure that we're not just saying, hey, go get this. And then people don't know what they're getting into and they get a bad product and they have a bad experience with this new technology.
Yep. You've given it a bit of thought. It's pretty clear. So, but on the heating and cooling, and Asa, you mentioned this before, or as one of you mentioned this before, you don't need, the heat pump doesn't need to be the sole source of heat in a home. You can have auxiliary, which frankly you need in some climate zone 7 and 8 applications.
Yeah, a majority of heat pumps are going to have some type of auxiliary heat anyways, right? So they can have either the electric resistance coil, for those coldest days, or in our case, you can do, dual fuel, so have a gas backup for it.
In our work, I would say that that's not the majority, but it's certainly, ductless heat pumps don't generally have, and the small ducted systems but that's more multifamily for bigger central single family stuff. It's much more common.
Yeah.
All right. That's good to know. You need a heat pump, but it doesn't have to do it all. So moving on to water heating, which also can be a little more challenging in colder climates, maybe. Elliot, what are the requirements for water heating?
Yep. So we require an ENERGY STAR certified heat pump water heater. So that's going to be, typically an integrated unit that's got the kind of all built into one package. And then we also require the connected criteria so that it has the ability to respond to a demand response event. And that might be actually in a lot of homes kind of the number one opportunity for that, to be able to do this kind of load shifting, flexible response that we're going to need out of the next generation of housing stock. Because you can preheat it. And a lot of times if you look at, when the hot water use happens versus when the peak events are, they're not particularly aligned. So there's a lot of ability to kind of preheat it and just say, don't do any water heating during this, 1 or 2 hours. And then we also have some sizing requirements to make sure that we've got a big enough tank, because it's a little bit of, to get the peak efficiency out of it, it can take a little bit longer to heat up again. And so we want to make sure you have a big enough tank for your family. And so if you're using like a 40-gallon tank, you're probably going to want to be looking at like a 50 or a 55. And if you're using a 50 or, then you probably want to be looking like an 80-gallon is kind of the rough rule of thumb. So we have a table with, depending on the number of bedrooms you have, to make sure you've got a big enough one. Again, it's one of those examples. We don't want to build or cheapen out on this, and then a consumer has a bad experience of it, and they're turned off this technology, now based on the bad experience.
Yeah, and on that point, we also have another requirement that for any heat pump installed in occupiable space, that they have to be rated at 55 decibels or less.
Okay.
Again, we don't want to have a bad consumer experience where their first time with the heat pump water heater it's a loud one that they just hate.
Well, you definitely see that. And 55 decibels is still pretty loud if it's, near your bedroom. But, there's not much equipment that's much quieter than that yet. So you got to start somewhere.
Yeah. And one of the goals of NextGen is to be a little bit more nimble than the core ENERGY STAR program. ENERGY STAR, we don't really change unless there's a code update. They're very small tweaks that we make to make the program a little bit more efficient. With NextGen, since we are trying to be, walking the line between pragmatism and cutting edge, we're going to be looking at the spec every year or two to see where we can make some improvements. So if we see that there are a substantial number of quieter water heaters, then that would be a really obvious place to bring that number down from 55 to 52 or whatever the availability says.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I mean, heat pump water heaters we've been working with them again. I've been working with them for over 20 years and they can work great, in basements of single family homes, even in the Northeast where I am, it's usually fine. Garages in Orlando.
Yep.
Usually fine. In a closet, if you don't have a garage or a basement, it's a little more problematic.
Yep, definitely.
So it's tricky. So how about, so you mentioned the integrated tank, but there are split or monoblock that are ENERGY STAR certified.
Yep. Yeah, those would be great. Those are more limited right now in terms of product availability, but I think that could be an answer for a lot of those kind of situations where you don't have a good place to put it. You don't have that basement or the garage that you can stick it in. I think that solves the noise and it solves the question of where is the heat coming from? Yeah, right.
That's a question that a lot of people ignore or don't get. Yeah,
absolutely. I think we will see more of those units, become available over time.
Especially in smaller dwelling units. Because like you said, single family with basements is easy, but even townhouses are tricky. And, the smaller the unit, as you get to more dense multifamily, just the water heating placement, if you're talking about like unitary systems, gets more and more challenging.
How about central systems for multifamily?
They can do it.
Are there ENERGY STAR certifications for 12-ton air to water heat pumps for central systems?
I would say we're kind of waiting to see that system in practice. I think we would be totally open to any solutions that present themselves in the multifamily space.
Gotcha.
Again, I have no problem admitting that heat pump water heating in multifamily is going to be the biggest barrier here for multifamily projects. There's no question about it.
It's tough. I mean, that we've seen some good case studies, and then we've seen some really not good case studies.
Right.
Where lots of our projects are trying to do it, and you just got to be very thoughtful and very careful. There's no cookie cutter solution.
Absolutely. And at the same time, though, so I think we're definitely looking at a smaller slice of the multifamily project types that even could kind of consider it at this point. But at the same time, like there are situations where you could put a closet on a balcony and have it vented to outdoors, to put a water heater
on the climate. Yeah.
Depending on the climate, or you could do the kind of hallway system that's like that, where you vent it, you put the closet next to the hallway, you vent it out to the hallway. Yep. You have that conditioned, as a central thing. So, we want to make it available to multifamily and make it an option for those people that have a situation where they can participate. And then,
gotcha.
I think that's well acknowledged that for situations where you have a big central system, we don't have a great answer, to be perfectly honest with you right now.
Yep.
Nobody does.
I agree. Cool. Let's move on. So on the appliance front, it seems like the key mandate above and beyond, what's in the base level of ENERGY STAR is cooking requirements, Asa.
Yeah. So like the first three requirements that we've mentioned, it's like the efficient, envelope and overall efficiency, space heating and water heating, like those are driving these like substantial emissions reductions. Our final two requirements are more like enabling technologies for decarbonization. So our final two requirements are induction and electric cooking and EV charging infrastructure. So in our background research, we are finding that, home buyers are like really attached to their gas cooktops. Surprise, surprise. But there is now like a technology that is better than gas for cooking, which is induction cooktops. So we wanted, since the program is called NextGen, we wanted to have, a technology that is visible to, the occupants, to the homeowners, to the apartment dwellers. People don't see their space heating or water heating equipment, right? Like a lot of people don't even know like what fuel type they have. So if it's electric or gas, like they're not going to know unless the system's not working.
Yeah.
That's not true for their cooking, right? Most people like will know like what type of, oven or stove that they have, even if they don't use it that often. So like that was really like a big rationale for requiring induction cooktops. We will hopefully, knock on wood, have an ENERGY STAR certification for induction cooktops pretty soon. The products team is working on that like as we speak. So at some point in 2023, we can expect there to be some type of designation for those, which will be awesome.
Cool.
But we really do think that when people are exposed to induction cooktops, because a lot of people just aren't familiar with them at all, that they will, be really pleased and like think of it not just as a viable substitute for gas, but like a substantial improvement to it. There's a lot of benefits, in addition to, boiling water in half the time, which is cool, but, like because they're cool at the touch, you don't have that burn or scald risk, which is, important for folks with families and young kids. Frankly, because they're cooler, they're easier to clean, which is awesome. They've got more precise temperature control, which means there's less of a chance that you'll have a boil over. So it's less like you'll have to clean, something, which is great. And, like I have a little, portable induction cooktop in my house because I have a gas oven and stove, so like when I was going down this next-gen development with the team, seeing a lot of research on, health risks to gas, so like that really motivated me to get an induction cooktop. So it's just like a little portable one burner that we have in our counter. And we use that like way more than our gas range right now.
Oh, interesting.
Not just because of, lower pollutants, but because it's just an easier thing to cook on. Like you set the number and it stays there. Whereas, with gas, like you got to like adjust the fob here, there.
Give it the old eyeball.
Yeah, exactly.
Flame, yeah.
So like we're able to like get it exactly where we need to and like do like a simmer for, anything, oftentimes mac and cheese for the kids because that's the only thing that they eat. But it's so much easier to make mac and cheese now. So like, quality of life improvement right there.
Nice. And the health issues with, we were talking about this when we were talking about doing this podcast. We talked about it's always surprised me that, we have things like vent-free gas fireplaces are horrible from an IAQ standpoint and banned from a lot of programs. Vent-free combustion appliances don't have them, but gas ranges are okay. Gas ranges and gas ovens are okay. They get a pass. And it always puzzled me. And, I'm sure folks can get in touch with you, Asa, for a lot of info on what the health impacts really are on this. I know you've dug into it quite a bit.
Yeah. So what we know is that, all cooking, gives off pollutants, ultrafine particulates, formaldehyde, and people don't often use their kitchen range hoods, even when they are ducted to the exterior. So like we want to have those, vented kitchen range hoods, but because they're only pulling, a fraction of the pollutants out, that fraction, is going to vary substantially based on like the effectiveness of the capture efficiency and if people frankly even turn on the range hood, if they remember or if they're not too loud or whatnot. So that's a challenge. But then when you add, your gas fuel, you're adding carbon monoxide and even more so nitrogen dioxide to like your list of pollutants from cooking. And there's a lot of scientific evidence that is able to point to higher levels in homes that have gas stoves and ovens, as well as associated health outcomes. I think the hardest number that we've seen is that children living in homes with gas stoves have a 42% increased risk of having asthma. And this is according to like a meta-analysis of 19 studies. That's not insignificant.
Yeah, that's not. So induction ranges required. You could still get away with a gas dryer if you wanted, right? I mean, you could still put a gas dryer in a next-gen home.
Yeah, we don't say anything on some of these other smaller users. So yeah, you can have a gas fireplace, gas dryer.
Okay.
Just it's not a big enough driver of emissions for us to make a statement on it. I think pragmatically,
right.
People aren't going to have electric for space and water heating and cooking, and then bring gas into a home just for a fireplace and a gas dryer. Like that's just too expensive with the hookup fees, with the monthly service fees, all of that. That's just not going to happen. I mean, maybe in an existing home where it's already there, like that might be there. Maybe if they're going to be in a substantially colder climate that they want to have gas for their backup heat, they might do it. But like, again, like that's not where we're seeing the numbers. So by getting like the major end users, to be electric, there's going to be a massive economic motivation just to not have gas in that home.
It makes tons of sense. Anyways, savings up front. Yeah.
I'll just clarify that I think you were talking about in general ASA with existing homes, but I'll just clarify that the ENERGY STAR program and the NextGen are definitely designed for new homes.
Oh yeah. It's good distinction.
Yeah.
So I think the last big requirement is EV charging. And Elliot, what exactly is required there? Do you have to put a charger in? Do you have to have capacity for a charger?
Mm-hmm.
What?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's a couple different options because there's just a range of scenarios that people are going to have. But just to kind of step back in terms of what we're trying to accomplish is that we want a homeowner to be able to make a confident buying decision the next time they're buying that car, that they've got a place to plug it in at home. Because even if that's, I think it's still kind of to be determined where most charging is going to happen in most scenarios. But I think you at least need a place to plug it in at home and have that option. So that's what we want. You go to the dealer, you're like, oh yeah, cool. I should at least be looking at an EV because, I know that I can. I know that I'm not going to have to like call the electrician and, have this like massive, project to like get the charging installed. So that's kind of what we're trying to get to. So the specific requirements are, if you have a single family detached home and you've got a garage or like a parking pad, dedicated parking pad, what we're saying is you need a 240 volt, 40 amp powered outlet near that location, in the garage, on the wall of the house, outside near the pad, whatever. And what that allows you to do is you could install a wall charger later very easily if you want that kind of super integrated, tucked away, look and amenity. Actually, all of the EVs really come with a mobile charger out of the gate that you could just pop in the trunk. So if you're okay just kind of plugging and unplugging that every time, you can actually just plug those directly into that powered outlet directly. So you wouldn't need any additional equipment. So it's that, from day one, you can charge your EV, and that's what you're going to be able to, again, kind of give you that buying confidence. When it gets to multifamily, then we have some more options.
Okay.
So you can do that, and there might be scenarios where that makes sense to do powered outlets, right? Think about like maybe a small like condo or something where everybody has a dedicated spot. I think that would be the right option.
Yep.
But there's other scenarios where it's a mid-rise or high-rise building and maybe underground parking, or there's a parking structure or something like that. And not every, there aren't dedicated spaces, or maybe it's mixed or whatever. So in that case, what we're saying is there have to be a dedicated number of shared chargers installed. So we're think about like the kind of more commercial chargers. They might have a little fob on it, or they might charge you to do it. That's fine. But the point is you've got some spots with those dedicated chargers. Like today, you're already seeing that in some apartment buildings. You're certainly seeing it in grocery stores, parking lots, and Target parking lots and those kind of things. So that's what we're talking about in that case.
Are there fractions on the multifamily side? If every occupant got an electric car, would there have to be capacity to charge an electric car for every tenant?
Yeah, there are fractions.
Okay.
We kind of landed at 10% as a starting point. So you take all the spots, all the parking spots that you're providing, and divide by 10, and that's how many of the chargers you have to provide. You can do some chargers that kind of have like 2 plugs, and so that's fine. You can count both as long as it's covering 2 spots,
Okay. Yep.
And that's the smart way to do it. And then it's kind of intelligently controls where the power goes, and so it can kind of reduce some of your infrastructure costs. But yeah, and then I think there's certainly the expectation that over time you're probably going to have to provide more and more as you have more residents that are having those. Once you have the power to the parking garage, it's a lot easier to expand it than it is to put it in the first time. So that's part of the thinking, is if we can get kind of a foothold of the power infrastructure out there and the conduit and everything, then it's easier to kind of fish more lines out over time as you need it.
So there are connectivity requirements for heat pumps and water heating. Anything there's not on this, because you only need an outlet. So if you don't put in a charger, you don't have to have connectivity, I guess.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, because of that. I think the primary initial market will be the single family. So that's because we're not actually saying you need to put a charger in. I will say there is an ENERGY STAR product spec for wall chargers. So I think if folks are, some builders will install those out of the gate for sure, because they're a nice selling feature. And they're not that expensive. And I think if you've got the kind of home buyer that might already have an EV or be looking at a EV, it's a really nice stop on the home tour, the model home tour, right? At least as maybe an upgrade option that they could go ahead and have you install. So, so folks should definitely look at the ENERGY STAR spec that does include those kind of connected criteria options, and it also makes sure like the standby power, you're not going to have big vampire loads, that kind of stuff. So,
yeah. So for the multifamily housing or the shared parking, like Elliot mentioned, you have to have 10% of your spaces have a EV charger there. So the requirements there is a level 2 charger, and it has to be an ENERGY STAR certified charger for those multifamily spaces.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So like where you have to do it for NextGen, it has to be an ENERGY STAR certified charger. And we do have an asterisk that it's capped at 5. So for like a really big parking garage, it's not a lot. Our thinking there is that if there's a visual demonstration that there are chargers there and people want more, it will be easier to expand. Again, as Elliot mentioned, since we're a national program and there's a lot of, our numbers, down in the South where, EV charging isn't quite as prevalent yet as the Northeast, we didn't want to have a prohibitively high number. Because we have a requirement that 20% of spaces also have to be EV capable, which means having, conduit run, towards them. So with, some EV chargers already there and having, additional conduit, it should be like relatively, inexpensive and unobtrusive to add additional like charging infrastructure.
Cool.
So it's
a lot of thought.
A lot of thought went into it. It's a little bit complicated, just like the different mix and match approaches we have here. But I would say at the end of the day, like for the EV charging in particular, like we wanted to had some minimal requirements that made sense on a national basis. Like local areas can like definitely add more. We're not saying you have to cap it at that. Hopefully like people will do more, if it makes sense in their market. But we didn't want to have like, for example, like without the cap of 5, EV chargers like can get expensive if you have to put in 30 or 40, for example.
Yeah,
we didn't want to have that limit people's ability to do next gen and put in, those ENERGY STAR heat pumps for space and water heating. So it really is, that trade-off of, how much do we focus on, the operational emissions reductions versus, the transportation emissions reductions. Like we think that this is a good first step.
So big picture, is this program, is this done? Is this launched? Can you get a next gen certified home now?
So we have the spec released. We released that in May, after going up for public comment. We have not fully launched the program yet. So while people can look at it, plan for it, you can't certify to it yet. So like timing, right now we're a little bit beholden to the energy modeling software companies. They have to integrate, ENERGY STAR version 3.2 into their software still, and they need to integrate, the ability to print certificates and labels for next gen. So we're hoping that the majority of, software companies will have next gen ready for, prime time early to mid 2023. So like that's our path.
Okay.
But in the meantime, again, the specification is out there, energystar.gov/nextgenhomes. You can go and look at it. It's currently in the form of a 1-page radar field checklist. We've been talking to a lot of, policymakers and utilities who are looking at, integrating this into like different incentive programs. That'll take a few years, to go into effect. So
I got an email. Yeah. I got an email this week from I live in Connecticut. Connecticut new construction programs. Next gen is a line item in their plans for next year. So people are paying attention.
Yeah, we're really excited about this program.
Awesome.
It's the first federal program specifically dedicated to operational decarbonization in the residential new construction place. So like it's good to be first, but also like. Everybody like seems to, be aligned behind, our approach of focusing on the big things and being pragmatic. And you can always build off of it and do more. But in terms of, your first step in this space, I would say like we feel pretty darn comfortable that we are close to where we need to be.
So you mentioned what the core document now is a radar checklist. I have to ask on behalf of all the raters that I work with, is there a lot of extra work for raters? I mean, it sounds.
We don't think so. I mean, because if you're looking at it, you're going to be looking at your space heating and water heating already.
Yeah, you already have to check all that.
You're going to check a box for induction. The one additional measure to look at, is there, the EV charging features in there. Again, in talking with software companies, like they are already thinking about putting in some of these like new line items for like demand response ready heat pump water heaters, demand response ready like heat pumps, like these additional like data points. So like we're again like aligned on that, which again is like really exciting for us. I would say like the one area that is going to require more work for the energy raters is on the heat pump installation. So we didn't touch on this earlier, but like this is a pretty big difference between NextGen and the core ENERGY STAR program. So like for the core ENERGY STAR program, there are 2 paths for verifying the HVAC design and installation. You can do like the legacy contractor credential or like the HQIDO approach, or you can do HVAC grading, or we call that track A now. So where the rater verifies, the design and installation of like key components of the heating and cooling system. So for ENERGY STAR core, you have the options. For next gen, because heat pumps for space heating and cooling the design installation is even more important than for, gas heating. You have to do the HVAC grading or Track A approach. So that means for any energy raters out there, if you've not looked at, becoming qualified and comfortable for HVAC grading, you need to get on that ASAP. The benefit on top of, a better performing heating and cooling system is that projects can get ERI points for good installation. So, as we're talking about like more efficient levels and requirements for the core Energy Star program, getting, 1 or 2 or 4 ERI points is becoming at a premium. So like this is, almost like a freebie way to earn your builders and developers some ERI points.
Gotcha. Cool. Yeah, interesting. Good distinction. I thought your answer was going to be no. It's just check a few boxes. It's a little bit more nuanced than that.
I mean, it's check a few boxes, but
yeah. But one of the boxes is in all fairness, it's one page. The checklist is one page. Plus, if you're familiar with our program requirements, we also have a page of footnotes.
Yep. That's right.
But yeah, and most of the requirements are straightforward. And I would say, this is an example of it's a future facing program. I think it's ready right now, but it is definitely a roadmap. And I think it's kind of pointing the way to, maybe 5 years in the future in terms of how we think a lot more people are going to be building. So this would be an example. I think everybody's going to move to HVAC grading over the next 5 years.
Okay.
Because instead of just being a paperwork exercise where you make sure the contractor is credentialed and they have to do a training and, all that jazz. And, that's good. That's better than nothing. But now we're actually doing a performance test with HVAC grading. So it's the difference between if you think about like a visual verification of duct leakage versus actually testing it. And that's the difference. And that's the kind of, so yes, it takes a little bit more time, but you get a lot more value out of it as well. That builder gets a lot more assurance that their system's actually working right. They've got, a second kind of opinion on it. They're not just taking the HVAC contractor's word for it. And you get the ERI points to boot. And so cool. I think that'll kind of help make some of the economics of it work, because instead of some other measure that you would have had to buy, pay for, you can pay for that extra testing time.
So that's that. Quite often our last question is, if we were to talk again in 5 years, what do you think we'd be talking about? And Elliot, you started in on that did I hear you right? That in 5 years, you think the next gen will be kind of the standard for ENERGY STAR, or I won't put words in your mouth. I'll let you answer. What do you think we'd be talking about in 5 years?
I think it's fair to say that we kind of see NextGen as a testing ground for these kind of technologies and this tech. I think it'll be a thing where we are adding new tech into it. I think it would be interesting in 5 years. We might be talking about doing some of this as a performance-based approach instead of a
I was going to ask that, and I decided not to. But I'm so glad. Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned it.
Yeah, I mean, no commitments, but there is a CO2 index out now. I think we're still kicking the tires on it and getting a comfort level with it and an intuition. But I think that's sending the right signals at the very least. It's sending the same signals that we're trying to with our prescriptive requirements right now. I think that would be interesting to look at. And then I think, on the other hand, I think we could see bringing some of these down into the main program, and, I think by 5 years from now, I think we probably will be asking the question of, should the core ENERGY STAR program be evolving to maybe not completely pivot to operational decarbonization, but maybe at least be considering it as part of the requirements.
Asa, how about you?
Yeah, I agree with everything that Elliot has said. With a performance-based approach to emission reductions, that's going to reward battery storage, which currently, is penalized, with the efficiency metric with the ERI because it uses a little bit of energy. And the ERI, doesn't look at time of use. But with emissions, you're talking about time of use, and there are specific rewards for load shifting, which is awesome. So yeah, I definitely see us coming up with sophisticated ways to reward both efficiency, because there are cost reductions in efficiency, as well as the emissions reductions, because that's really, the brand promise of Energy Star at the end of the day is cost reductions, emission reductions. And then the other big thing is we're going to see where the industry is at for embodied carbon.
Yeah.
Right. So hopefully there'll be tools out there, and that is definitely within the scope of what NextGen needs to be. Because, once you tackle operational emissions, that's going to be the next thing. So we're tracking that really closely.
It's awesome to hear builders, developers, raters. They see the rules in the checklist. It's just great to hear the thought and consideration that goes into all this stuff. And it's
yeah, definitely. I think it's also easy to get lost in the checklist, right? And be kind of focused on these nitty gritty details. And so it's helpful to kind of take a step back. And we haven't even gotten to this, right? But this is one level bigger than just what's happening in the building industry. This is an entire economy-wide transition that is just beginning now. And so when you talk about what are we going to be talking about in 5 years, I think whether you're talking 5 years or 25 years, we're going to kind of be talking about the same thing, which is moving this giant ship of the entire U.S. economy in every sector, over to thinking about carbon and and getting the carbon out. And this is our little corner of the U.S. economy. And what we're trying to do here is kind of give builders a sneak peek and raters, some education and some comfort level with these questions, to kind of give them that 5 year or 10 year, if you're not thinking about it now, and that's fine. You don't have to do it now, but you should definitely be thinking about it. Everybody should be thinking about all of these technologies now, because this is the core of the answer to this giant project that, again, everybody in the U.S. economy is going to be increasingly focused around.
Perfect. Yeah, next generation stuff. Thank you both. We've been chatting for, we've been chatting for a full hour, I think. Thank you both very much.
Yeah, this is great. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks for listening, and thanks to Elliot and Asa. There are links to the program information and lots of other stuff that we talked about on the show notes. Go to swinter.com/podcast to see the show notes. Buildings and Beyond is produced by Stephen Winter Associates. We are focused on making buildings better in many ways. Check us out at swinter.com. Check out our careers page if you're looking for opportunities. We have positions in many, if not all of our offices in Boston, Connecticut, Manhattan, and Washington, D.C. And thanks to the podcast team here, especially Alex Mirabile, who does the heavy lifting on producing these episodes and editing most of the episodes, including this one. Thanks again for listening.